What's happening, folks? I'm back with another reaction, and my kitten is also a crazy person. But yeah, we're gonna listen to one of my favorite acid-techno tracks ever, certainly post-2000, though I was thinking about this recently. For a long time, it seemed like that was such a significant demarcation point. Not only were genres evolving by the time you get to the end of the millennium, new ones starting to crop up, some of the players of, classic 90s tracks and labels beginning to drop off the map or, move into different things and stop producing. But yeah, ultimately for a few years, it seemed like such a significant demarcation point. In 2007, it's like, okay, tracks in techno and trance now, they're not what they were in like 97, 98. But it's been a lot longer since 2000 now than it was then relative to the glory days or the golden days of the 90s. So like, it's weird to say post-2000 acid techno when acid techno in 2002, 2012, and now 2023, there's going to be some differences, not only in terms of what labels are active, even producers that are producing that whole time. I always talk about the Geezer. He's been going since the very early days of London acid techno. But his flavor and his styles have evolved and shifted over time, or at least he's branched out and made different things. So again, to say post-2000 acid techno feels way too broad now. It's been, too long. So my brain needs to come up with a new rubric, which again, historians are wary about, it's the 70s and the 80s, because in reality, 79 is a lot more like 81 than it actually was like 71. And we, tend to over-homogenize similarities relative to years. But bottom line, this is one of my favorite acid techno tunes, even though it was made well after the 90s. This is from 2013. It's the first track on Steve Mills' Project 303 label. And as you can see, I'm a big fan of the record. I actually have 3 copies. This may be one of the only records that I have 3 copies of, and I'm not even sure how that happened. Normally I just get 2 to make sure that I have A, backup, and B, sometimes you want to mix from one track on the record into another, the way you can digitally, but you can actually do it on vinyl if you have 2 copies of the record. So, bottom line, huge fan of this tune. It's a track by Sterling Moss called Can You Feel the Acid? Side point of connection. On Discogs, it was the first time I ever talked to Bad Boy Pete. I had commented on this track, and Pete had replied to my comment saying he enjoyed it. He also felt it had the intensity of old school acid techno, which is actually the reason I brought up that 2000 thing, because in my comment on Discogs in 2013, I was like, man, I love this, and it's making me feel about acid techno the way I did, in 96, 97 when I first started going to parties. So, with no further ado, let's get it. This is Sterling Moss, Can You Feel the Acid, on Steve Mills' Project 303, which ran for about 3 or 4 years, but this is the first release, and to my mind, this is the best track on the entire label. So, here we go, Sterling Moss, Can You Feel the Acid? Has a hard house feel right here. And for those of you who know, I think Sterling's original producing background was in the hard house area until he got more into techno proper. Eventually hooking up with Chris Liberator and becoming the deadly duo we all know. This is a case where my favorite part of the track is technically the secondary intro. This is the proper intro, right? The part between the next level and the main breakdown is actually my favorite. Coming up right here. Mechanical, a whole bunch of security robots just activated. Skynet has been activated. steadily rising. It's like an acid blizzard. It's just everywhere. But so that's the question. Can you feel that? Chills out for a second. It reposes the question. it's like, I never am in that track to the very end because I'm usually mixing out. Although fair to say, it's one I do tend to use it near the end of sets. One of my live sets are like, actual recordings from a party that I have here on YouTube, which is from Acid Rain. It was a party in Costa Mesa 2015. I use that as the penultimate track, and then I go into Chris and Sterling's Acid Corrosion as the final tune. Anyway, the point is, that is one of my favorite acid tunes ever. I just absolutely love the intensity of it. It's a hurricane. As I mentioned, I love in particular the moment or the period after the secondary intro before the main breakdown. Now, the whole thing is amazing, and indeed, as I mentioned, I love after the main drop where it kind of pulls everything out, lightens things up for like one measure, gives you the vocal, and then drops it back in hard as ever. Like, so I do love the whole tune, but I love that secondary intro leading into the main breakdown bit because it just keeps growing and rising and growing, and you just feel the hurricane like erupt around you. So really top tune from an artist that I like almost everything he does, but even saying that, this is one of my all-time favorites. So big ups to Sterling, and again, it was a short live label as it turned out, but lots of good quality tracks on the label. We'll come back for some others. Do let me know what you think. I will see you next time. Peace.